Thanks to Sharon, Haneen, and Ron for working together with me on this. When we speak to practitioners, and we are in a lucky position to do that often, and with people across the world really, there are two questions they ask. What we find, does it work across populations in different countries? And what we find is that vulnerable to countermeasures. And we have 3 experiments did across the world in different countries, and we looking for countermeasures. And we now in this presentation, we merged the data sets of those 3 experiments, and I will discuss them here now. Most research, of course, is in weird countries, and people want to know, does it also work somewhere else? And we know that some verbal cues are indeed dependent on the population. For example, especially there, Paul Taylor, he does great research on that. But we are not interested ourselves in these kind of differences. We're not interested because lie detection is already so difficult. And you make it even more difficult if you now need to say, well, in that population, look for this, in that for that, and so forth. So we are mainly interested in cues that we think work across cultures. And the one we're looking for, we expect them to work across cultures, because we know that liars have the inclination to keep their stories simple, and that is a cross-cultural effect. So therefore, these cues should work in cross-cultural settings. Countermeasures in verbal lie detection, are they successful or not? It depends. We know that if you inform interviewees about the VA approach, it will make the effect more, makes it stronger. So the countermeasures don't work at all. The effects become stronger. If you use countermeasures or inform people how SU works, it will weaken the veracity effect, but it's still present. And if you inform people about CBCA and RM, you will see the veracity effects completely disappear. So it really depends on what you're looking for, what you do. What's the difference? The difference is that VA and SU are statements compared with evidence. So these are evidence-based tools. In CPCA and RM, it's not the case. It's just about the quality of details. So call them statement quality tools versus evidence-based tools. And of course, it's more difficult for lie tellers to make up a story that is, if there's evidence involved, because you can easily contradict the evidence, then it should be easier to make up a story that just need to have high quality details. What we are looking for are those 3 types of details: complications, common knowledge details, and self-handicapping strategies. And these are just quality details. So we think that if you tell people about those cues, it certainly will weaken the effect and maybe even will disappear. These are the cues we're looking for: details, complications, common knowledge details, self-handicapping strategies, plausibility. And these are in meta-analyses, you can see they're pretty good and decent effect sizes for each of those 5 cues found in meta-analyses. Details is a unit of information decoded either via Plato or RM. In those studies, we do RM. I did a lot of detail as a veracity cue in the past, not anymore. I think I'm not convinced it works. I think it's far too vague. And for example, we're talking now about countermeasures. Of course, it's very easy to have countermeasures against just detail. And of course, you can say, well, if lie tellers can come to know that, just give some details and you will be believed. It's absurd. And of course, you will say that, no, because then we listen to the type of detail. Well, if you listen to the type of detail, look then for type of detail, not for just details in general. But I think it is still important because it tells us about the amount of information you get. And that's important. If you speak to practitioners, they really like to get more information. The more they get, the better it is. Not only truth tellers, also lie tellers. If you get lie tellers a lot of information, it will make their life far more difficult. Maybe not so much in the interview, but certainly after that. So to get a lot of information is very, very useful. Common knowledge details, you also can call them scripts. You can't call them scripts because that is something else in the literature, but it's something like this. Strongly invoked stereotypical information about events. In the Louvre Museum, we saw the Mona Lisa. Well, you can Google that. Indeed, Louvre has the Mona Lisa. You don't have to be there, have to be there to give a statement like that. A complication is an occurrence that affects the storyteller and makes the situation more complicated. There's a complication now in that I'm here in my house with Sharon, and our dog is here as well. Sharon needs to go to the shop. She can't get to the shop yet, because if she goes to the shop, then the dog comes to my room here. And if I talk to the computer, the dog starts talking to me. So therefore, Sharon is now in a different room, keeping the dog there. And when I finish my talk, she can go to the shop. Complications, and there's another example I can give. For example, if people talk about the Louvre Museum and seeing the Mona Lisa, I don't know who of you has seen the Mona Lisa, has been there. I've been there in 1979, and it was an absolutely massive disappointment. It's a huge disappointment. That painting, that is extremely small, far smaller than you think. And it's behind thick glass. You can't see a single thing. And the room is absolutely packed. And if you are my size, which is not at all impressive, well, to get to the front is impossible. If you stand in the back, you can't see a single thing at all. And this is, of course, an example of the Mona Lisa. You can see here, that was after somebody, an idiot, put some white stuff there on the Mona Lisa. But you can see how busy it is, but it's always busy. This is not a picture, just, you can see it is absolutely horrendous. And I was there in 1979. Now you have those phones on those sticks. You can, of course, take a picture, take some more pictures. Not in 1979, where you just have a photo camera with the rolls on it. So we didn't take a picture at all. In fact, we were there for a few seconds and walked out of that room. It's horrible. Well, what I say now about the Mona Lisa is I give a lot of complications in that story. It is a packed room. You can't see a single thing. It's small painting behind glass and so forth. Self-handicapping strategies, justifications as to why someone is not able to provide information. I can't remember, it was a while ago when it happened. That's a self-handicapping strategies. This is another example in the UK here. Dominic Cummings, he was the advisor of Boris Johnson, who was our prime minister. And Cummings in COVID time drove with his wife and child for about 400 miles from London to somewhere else, completely illegal. He did so and was interviewed about that. And he was asked whether he had spoken to Johnson about that. And he said, yes. And of course, people want to know, what did you discuss? But at that time, Cummings had COVID, Johnson had COVID, and this is what he said. When we were both sick and in bed, I mentioned to him what I had done. Unsurprisingly, given the condition we were in, neither of us remembered the conversation in any detail. That's a self-handicapping strategy. He's also now not only self-handicapping himself, he's also not telling you already, don't ask Johnson, he can't remember it either. This guy knows certainly well what he discussed there with Johnson at that day. He doesn't want to tell you. Plausibility, how likely is it that activities happened in the way it described? So what do we expect? We expect truth tellers to give you more details, more complications, fewer of those scripts, fewer self-handicapping strategies, and their statements should be more plausible. We think that all these effects will emerge across the culture we're looking for, because it's all to do with liars, keep the story simple. And we think that if you use countermeasure, we'll come back to that later, then it may not be working so well anymore. So what we had, 3 studies, in total 631 participants, well, males and females, mostly students 22 years old. They were from Lebanon, from Mexico and South Korea, and either spoke the truth or not. And they were either informed or not informed about 3 of those cues, about complications, common knowledge details, and self-handicapping strategies. And we gave them a part to read from the article there. It's an LCP article from 2018 that has a kind of a 1 or 2 pages about what these cues in fact mean. This is what the study was this. Participants were asked to tell the truth or to lie about a trip they supposedly made within the last year or the last 24 months, because we also ran the study. It was interrupted due to the COVID. The trips were examined via selection form. The truth tellers really have been to these places last year or 24 months. The liars did not, but they were asked to make up a story. They were given a computer and so forth, and time to prepare themselves to make up a story about going to these cities. And the informed participants were given the relevant parts to read of that article. The interview protocols differed per study, but basically it is discussed the trip in as much detail as possible. Slightly different questions. We were looking for all the information, all the new information we got in that interview. Factors we're looking for: true and lie, the countermeasure type of detail present or not, and the population: Lebanon, Mexico, South Korea. We had many covariates because different in those studies, but still 12 cells, quite a few participants in each cell, as you can see there. This is what we found. We found 2 main effects. Veracity is a main effect, population a main effect. Veracity population also interaction effect, but not at univariate level. Nothing about countermeasures. Nothing, not a main effect, not an interaction effect, nothing at all. But I will come back in slightly more detail about that. Veracity effect, this is what we found. We found truth tellers, these are the D-scores. Truth tellers, more details than lie tellers. Truth tellers, more complication than lie tellers. Lie tellers, more common knowledge details than truth tellers. And the truth tellers, the story sounded more plausible. If you can see here, certainly plausibility has a very nice D-score, 0.78. Complication is also quite nice, 0.42. Details, not really, 0.28. This is not the D-scores, but these are the number of details we got. You can see here, if you compare Lebanon with Mexico and South Korea, the difference. They're all talking about the trip they made. The South Koreans say far more than the Mexicans, who say more than the Lebanese. I come back to that in the discussion, because the Lebanese, the Arabs, that's an interesting group. I'll come back to that. You can see also in complications, far more in South Korea than in Mexico, than in Lebanon. But if you look at plausibility, there's not so much difference there. So the Koreans give you far more details, far more complications, but not so much more plausible compared to the other two. These are the D-scores per country. And I'm more interested in complication and plausibility, far more than the other ones. You can see complications here. It's the same effect size, 0.58, 0.55, 0.50 in Lebanon, Mexico, South Korea. It really works cross-culturally. Look at plausibility, that is very high. You can see, especially there in Lebanon, but also very decent in Mexico and South Korea. These are cross-cultural cues. Complicated details, by the way, as well, but details is something that's, okay, not so much for me anymore. But complications and plausibility, you can see it's all three. Very decent D-scores in all three countries. It really is cross-cultural stuff. But of course, what we know that lie tellers are more likely to prepare themselves for interviews than truth tellers. So we had now more analyses in which we compared the uninformed truth tellers. So truth tellers were not informed about complications and so forth. And we compare them here either with the uninformed lie tellers who were not informed, but also the informed lie tellers. And this is what we found. Again, complications and plausibility, that's what I'm interested in. You can see here the truth tellers uninformed, that's the blue line, 0.45 complications. If they're uninformed, truth tellers, informed lie tellers, 0.22 D-score. It is still significant, but you can see it gets far lower. And 0.22 is, from applied perspective, not so much interesting anymore. So you get now the situation, still significant, but not really something to pay attention to. So countermeasures for complications work, in other words. But now look at plausibility, 0.76, the truth tellers and the uninformed lie tellers. It is 0.57 for the truth tellers and the informed lie tellers, still very, very decent. So even those countermeasures group, they may give you more complications and so forth, the lie tellers at least, but it doesn't sound, there's still a difference in plausibility between the two groups. So what's the discussion is this, the veracity cues, details, but also complication and plausibility also emerge in non-weird populations. And we've also, here we compare Lebanon, South Korea, and Mexico. We've done this also in Singapore, and there we also found that complications more in truth tellers and lie tellers. We've also done this in Russia, in St. Petersburg, they're the same. Truth tellers, more complication, lie tellers. So I think we going into the stage, we're pretty confident that this is really a cross-cultural finding. Plausibility is not, we only investigated in the three countries and just measured, but I think, I get my guesses, that's also very much a cross-cultural cue. Plausibility is the strongest cue, followed by complications. Plausibility, I think, is interesting. I don't say, based on this, to practitioners use it. I don't say that at all. We give a 3-day training to practitioners, and we never ever mention the word plausibility to them, never ever. However, I think that researchers should start researching it. There are not many researchers doing it, all kind of reluctance against it. I think that's wrong. It is very strong in our research, also other people's research. If you look for that, plausibility always has a very strong effect size. And of course, you may think for all kind of reasons you don't want to investigate it. Practitioners are using it. So my recommendation is to other researchers, start looking for plausibility. Stop thinking that that's not worth examining. Stop thinking that, use it. Arabs underreport, that's what they do. We, for example, know that not only for our research, we've got quite a few studies now in which we compare the Brits and the Arabs. And also here found that comparing the Arabs and the Mexicans and the South Koreans, but also Lorraine, my colleague Lorraine Hope, found that in a study, in a memory study. So now, as a kind of video type of recall, the Arabs and the Brits, and the Arabs report far less information than the Brits do. Now, I don't think that you can say the Arabs have a poor memory. There's something else. There's something else why they underreport. And I think it's very interesting to figure out why. I think the only thing we know now is that we do not know why that's the case. And I think that we, as researchers, should try to figure out why is that the case. Because, as I said earlier, if you get, the more information you get is better, far better for lie detection purposes, for other reasons as well. Really try to get more information, especially out of Arabs. I think that that's a urgent thing to try to find out. Finally, information about complication reduces the diagnostic value of that Q, but plausibility effect remains. That's my talk. Thank you very much.